All right, everyone, welcome to economics. It's week 5 in our distance learning. I've prepared this video for you to help you get through the information that we're going to study this week. Your goal for this week is to take notes on the 6 economic functions of government. I've pasted out so that you can take notes on the first 3 today and tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday, and you can take notes on the last 3, Thursday, Friday. You can use Wednesday to email me or try and get in touch with me to ask questions and make sure that you're on the right track. So, this whole presentation is about the 6 economic functions of government. And what that means is that the government is going to be involved in our economy in America. And we like to say that there are 6 ways in which they are involved. America is a mixed market system, so you'll remember some of our flow charts and our circular flow from earlier in the year. In a mixed market, the households and the businesses have a relationship. They are exchanging goods and services and factors of production and money in order to produce things and consume things. Households are consuming, businesses are producing. But in a mixed market, you also have the government involved. And the government is going to have some type of say in this process. They're going to interact with the households, the consumers, and they're going to interact with the businesses, the producers. America has a mixed market economy. This means that sometimes the government is involved in the economy and sometimes they let the economy run on its own. For instance, the government has some rules for how a business might build a house. Say you own a construction company. That construction company can build a house in almost whatever layout it wants. However, the government inspects the house to make sure that the plumbing, the electric, the framing, and all of those things are safe. So they let the business run and they let the business do its thing, but they do check it once in a while to make sure that it's not producing a product that's going to be unsafe for the consumers. That's an example of the government being involved in the economy. The US government interacts with businesses and households in 6 major ways. These are the 6, and you'll note these on the notes so you can jot these down. The government maintains legal and social framework. They create some structure. Framework is structure. Picture it like the skeleton to your body. They have laws, they have rules, they have some social skeleton to make sure that this country can run. Right? One example would be saying we have towns, and then we have counties, and then we have states, and then we have the country. That provides a skeleton or a framework, a social framework for how our country works. They also have a legal framework, and that legal framework could be as simple as saying, hey, there are 3 branches of government, or here's some rules we're going to follow. The government also maintains competition. They want businesses to compete because they think that will provide the best product and prices for the consumers. The government provides public goods and services. Think dams and highways and Medicare and I'm trying to think of other welfare programs. Unemployment, that's a service that the government provides. The government also redistributes wealth. They collect wealth via your taxes, and then they redistribute it. And they do that in several ways we'll talk about. They correct for externalities. An externality is an unintended consequence. One of the major examples is pollution. Businesses run and produce things, and for instance, you have Climax Mine up there on the hill, and they're producing a product, and when they produce that product, they pollute the earth. And the government tries to correct for that side effect. A good way of looking at externalities is calling them side effects. And sometimes the government tries to encourage positive side effects. And then the government stabilizes the economy. They try and keep the economy from swinging too far low and too high. Can the government run the economy? Maybe, but in a mixed market, they're only helping here and there. So today we're going to go over the first three. The first one is maintain legal and social framework. This is something that the government does to try and help the economy move. The government creates laws. They provide courts. They provide information and services to help the economy function better. They establish a monetary system. They define and enforce property rights. I don't know if you all have seen any information about the census, but every 10 years the government counts the number of people who live here. When they count the number of people who live in this country, then they're providing information. And now businesses are going to be able to make decisions based off of those numbers. Sorry about that. Anyways, as we were saying, the government is going to provide this structure. They're going to provide some rules so that businesses know what they can do and what they can't do. They're going to provide some framework so that people kind of have an understanding of how to operate. Right? It's like when you're a little kid and you're playing out in the neighborhood and someone says, well, why do we need to follow these rules? Why can't we just play however we want? Why do we have to play kickball this way or soccer that way? We'll make up our own rules. And then when you decide to lose all those rules, the game starts to fail because people don't understand how to play it. People don't understand how to interact with one another. The government's trying to provide some legal and social framework here, some type of structure. If you were in a command market or a command economy, think communism, then the government would tell you what you can do and can't do all of the time. It would be more than framework. It would be an exact recipe. You have to act this way. You have to run a business this way. You have to produce a good or service in this way. In our system, the government sometimes says you have to do things and sometimes just gives guidelines. And other times will allow a company or a household to do whatever it wants. Here are some examples. Teddy Roosevelt, or Franklin Roosevelt, his cousin, Franklin Roosevelt, helped push the New Deal through in the 1930s. America was in a huge depression, and he helped create new programs, legal and social framework to help get America out of the depression. He helped make the economy function better. He established some monetary systems, right? Monetary money. He established some groups that would help make the government or make the banking systems smoother and safer. Dodd-Frank was some legislation that was passed to try and prevent the financial crisis from occurring again. Okay, another function of the government is to maintain competition. The government creates and enforces antitrust law. A trust is a monopoly, and a monopoly is when one business owns or controls is probably a better word, a lot of a market, right? In other words, if I go to a farmer's market in Dillon and there are 50 vendors there, 50 farmers are selling their goods. Some are selling corn and potatoes or fruits, whatever. There are 50 different people selling a variety of products. All of those folks are competing against one another for business. You go to that market, that physical market, and you have options for who you can buy your food from. Let's say that 40 out of those 50 farmers were owned by the same corporation. In other words, one person owned 40 of those 50 businesses, then that person would have a monopoly. They would be able to control the prices and control what they're producing. And because it's a large percentage of the entire market, 40 out of 50, they would be considered monopolistic or having a monopoly. The government wants to avoid that because when one group can control a bulk of a market, then they can do whatever they want with the prices and the consumers suffer because they might make the consumers pay more money. You want competition because competition forces prices to be lower and that benefits the consumers. The government encourages business growth through subsidies, tax incentives, and laws. They try and keep this competition going by creating subsidies, by saying, hey, we will pay you some money to produce so many things. You saw this a lot during the Obama administration. The Obama administration subsidized solar panels and electric cars and things like that. They tried to make it advantageous for consumers to purchase those things and for businesses to produce them. They said, we know that right now the technology for solar panels is not that great, so we as a government are going to try and subsidize it or provide tax incentives, tax breaks for the consumers who purchase it and the businesses who produce it. And then in that way, they spark the competition. And now what you're seeing today are more solar panels and a handful of more electric car companies because the government was trying to make that a competitive market. You see the government trying to break up mergers. Time Warner, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Sprint have all tried to merge. Some of those went through, some of them did not. But the government will get involved and say, no, 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 that can't happen. In 1997, 96, the mid-90s, Vail Resorts tried to buy Arapahoe Basin ski area, and the federal government, the Department of Justice, stopped that merger and said, Vail can't do that because then they would own too many ski areas along I-70. And if they do that, then they can jack up the prices. So they stopped Vail from buying it. Here's one that's very easy to understand. The government also provides public goods and services. This could be the military, this could be electricity, this could be healthcare, this could be highways, but the government will literally give us things. That's part of the mixed market economy. And we can get in big arguments about how much the government should do for us and how much they shouldn't. But the reality is that the government does provide public goods and services. If the government didn't build the highway system in the 1950s and 60s, then no one would have. Or at least not to that degree of quality. Because that cost billions and billions of dollars. And the government is the only entity that can pool enough money together to make that happen. And sometimes people complain that the government doesn't do that efficiently or the government wastes their money when they produce these things. And, there's definitely some truth there. But ultimately, the government is the one who can collect enough money from the citizens to make some of these things happen. Right now, the United States government is spending a whole bunch of money just trying to keep people employed. They're providing unemployment services for folks. So I don't know if anyone has seen it, but they're going to be adding to the unemployment funds. And if someone has lost their job during this time period and they're on unemployment, the government will be giving them money because they know they're going through a tough time. That's the government interacting with the economy. That happens in a mixed market. If this was a free market, the government wouldn't do anything during COVID. Nothing at all. If it was a command economy, the government would control everything all the time. But in a mixed market, sometimes the government provides goods and services and sometimes they don't. Great. So I think that's where we're going to stop for today. Those are the first three ways in which the government interacts with the economy. We looked at maintain legal and social framework, maintain competition, provide public goods and services. Those are things the government does to try and keep the economy moving. Next class, we'll look at redistribute wealth, correct for externalities, and stabilize the economy.